Hello and welcome. Grab yourself a tasty beverage, it's time to get deeply nerdy. In today's video, we're going to go deep into the Dungeons & Dragons past to the classic Fiend folio and a rarely mentioned plant humanoid monster known as the Needleman. Not an individual, but a whole species of wood-dwelling, intelligent, zombie-looking plant folks. From a distance, they could easily be mistaken for a well-camouflaged wood elf, and as you get closer, they look more and move more kind of wrong. So you start to think they're undead zombie elves of some sort, but no, closer still you realise they look like cactus-shaped, like a plant person, covered in clusters of fine needles about the length and shape of pine needles, but they're really quite vicious spines. So what sort of ecology do these creatures have? Why have you never heard of them, and how have they changed and adapted over the long history of Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gathering? The monsters found in the pages of the 1981 Fiend folio were collected up from the fan creations sent into White Dwarf magazine. Back in the mid to late 1970s, it was very much a United Kingdom version of Dragon magazine and covered a wide range of role-playing games that were just as popular in Britain as they were in America. This was the era where D&D was spreading rapidly and found rich, very rich ground in the UK before Games Workshop split away from the original publishers of D&D, the company TSR, thanks to Gary Gygax basically shafting them, but that's an ancient history. Without those events, we would never have gotten Warhammer Fantasy and later Warhammer 40k, no Space Marines, and so on. It is what it is. Since the fan who sent the Needleman to White Dwarf magazine never actually signed anything other than a limited first dibs license on the concept, even that is a big maybe, because there are no records left either way, it's quite true that TSR and later Wizards of the Coast don't have any legal ownership of it, along with just about every other single monster found in the Fiend folio, including the Githyanki, the Norka Goblins, Growl, and so many other so-called iconic intellectual properties that they claim to own. Fun fact, they don't. Their claim hasn't got a leg to stand on, legally speaking. Trevor Gravier, who sent in the Needleman, which appeared originally in White Dwarf issue 6 in 1978, and the Galdshrit monster concept, plus an article on criminals as a character class for Traveller RPG in issue 19, optional Traveller skill rules in issue 25, plus some RPG reviews in issue 34, along with more obscure fanzines at the time, such as Troll Crusher issue 27. Oh yeah, Wizards of the Coast, some of us do the research and check the receipts. I bet the lawyers throw darts at my picture on the wall in their office. The Needleman was later included in the Monstrous Compendium for Greyhawk Adventures Appendix in 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons and the Monstrous Compendium Annual Volume 3, and had a name change and design change, appearing as the Needlefolk in Dragon Magazine issue 292 in February 2002, and later on page 158 of the 2nd Monster Manual for 3rd edition D&D. In 5th edition, the Needleman appear as the Needle Blight and are amongst the class of similar plant creatures including the tree, twig, and vine blights. Although there's no direct connection between the needle blights and cactus folk for Magic the Gathering, I think they convert over particularly well, and there's a lot to draw on in the long history of these creatures in the game. Alright, enough sage flexing. What's the ecology of the needle folk? While they do appear and move around as humanoids, including a total lack of roots, which means that they have to drink water through their mouths just like any other humanoid does, they are still plants. Their skin is a layer of tiny leaves which change over the seasons, like many trees do. A ruddy green in the summer months and turning mottled brown and reds in the fall, and those in deserts where it's always hot and sunny will stay green all year round. You usually find needlefolk in woodlands though, where they wander around looking as gaunt as a corpse with a zombie-like shuffling walk. They don't really have any mammal sexual characteristics, hence why they're called Needle Man. They really have no idea what the hell gender is, that's just mammal stuff. To reproduce, the needlefolk just grow seed pods, which detach from them and grow in the ground until they grow their own limbs and start to move around by themselves. So it's typical to find a grove of related needlefolk, all basically identical to each other, with no real society, culture, or leadership. Intelligence is just not much higher than that of a turtle. However, this is a bit of a mystery to the sages. Many needlefolk can be seen wearing tight-fitting yellow breechcloth underwear, or occasionally what appears to be the remains of ceremonial white robes. And I do wonder if the material is made by them. I suspect the white robes are nothing more than the needlefolk molting their old skin leaves, and the leaf structures also have tiny barbs that can be used as a kernel of an idea for the needlefolk growing their own gear, which can blossom into a complete technology later on. as we shall see. The habitat of the needlefolk are woodlands usually, though there's no reason they can't exist in the desert. They don't look nearly as cactus-like as they probably should, because they can hide so much more effectively in thick conifer forest, where they seek out such places to dwell if they can. They can survive winter conditions, even quite harsh winters, by dropping their leafy coating and going into a dormant state for as long as required. Normally they don't move around very quickly anyway. Their movement is described as stately or graceful if you're being generous. But when threatened or otherwise provoked, though they can see an elf, they become much faster, moving with the same agility and speed of a human. Needlefolk are communal and tend to gather in areas where they find the most suitable for their needs, so it's rare to find one alone, and common to encounter anywhere from 5 to 50 of the things, which is a good reason why they're so dangerous. The elves and the needlefolk have always hated each other, and needlefolk will often attack elven people on sight. Luckily, they can't see very far in earlier editions, and the maximum effective range of their flung thorny needles is around 200 feet, and outside that range, unless you happen to be really making a loud noise and thumping the ground very hard, or if you're an elf, they won't see you as anything more than a blur. They can see quite well in the dark and out to that range as well though. Elves can somehow be sensed up to 1200 feet away. Nobody's quite sure how they do this. It's not magical, supernatural ability anyway. Close up, their sensitivity grants them blind sight, making them difficult to sneak up on, and those finger-looking things on the ends of their arms are hooked and very sharp thorns that they can shred enemies with like a paw full of claws. If they can though, they will always retreat and use their ranged needle attack, as it's much more effective and less risky for them. Though they do attack in groups, they are not organised, they have no leadership, and they don't care what the rest of their group is doing or how many are being chopped down around them. They don't get scared, and they don't negotiate. The one exception is elves. Again, they know when they are outmatched, and they will wait until a sufficient number of them are within range before they start the attack on elven people, but only if they think they are badly outnumbered. While this is rare to see, they can actually speak the Sylvan language with reedy and whistling voices that sound more like hisses and squeaks, a little like a dolphin who is very drunk. They speak slowly and haltingly with a limited vocabulary, but they tend to understand Sylvan well enough. Again, that's earlier edition lore. Needlefolk reproduce by seeds, with each needlefolk producing them in the autumn. The seed pods are brown and covered with spiny thorns. Because they fall close to the parent plant, groves of needlefolk tend to spring up wherever one has chosen to spend a season. Moving on to 5th edition D&D, how have the needlefolk evolved and where can you find them? The needlefolk have now joined the class of malevolent plant creatures called the Blights, a far more evil class of monsters. Now at least the elves have got a very good reason to hate them, as much as the needlefolk hate the elves. They appear in both the 2014 Monster Manual as standard 1/4 challenge rating Needle Blights, then in Modern Canaan's Fiendish Folio Volume 1 on page 16, we have the challenge rating 3 Needle Lord and the challenge rating half Needle Spawn. The text tells us that the Needle Spawn always mean a Needle Lord, a much more powerful Fey native version of these creatures, is somewhere in the vicinity, and they are created by the Needle Lords from the seed pods it scatters around any worldly forest it enters and wanders around in. And here is the interesting new twist they provide for the spawn, and a good reason the elves hate them. Any seed pods will remain dormant until a humanoid corpse appears close enough for them that the seed pod becomes active and mobile, burrowing into the corpse and feeding on the decaying meat, and then rapidly wrapping its sprouting tendrils tightly around the corpse's skeletal remains and animating itself and lurching around, looking a lot like a zombie. One of the major changes to the creatures is that needle blights don't have eyes anymore. They're restricted to a 60-foot blind sight, so they are restricted to hearing, smelling, and feeling the vibrations of things, movement of things fairly close to them, and they won't react to anything further away unless some other means exists to inform them. Also, in Forgotten Realms lore, they gained a specific origin, which is the form of a mutant corrupted tree. The legend has its origin in 3.5 edition in the Libris Mortis Undead sourcebook, actually, where the first Gulthias tree sprouted from the stake used to slay the vampire Gulthias of Night Fang Spire, head of the cult of the red dragon Ashardalon. The stake destroyed Gulthias, but the vampire's latent magic caused the stake to sprout, growing into a sapling infused with vampiric power. A druid was said to have later discovered the sapling and transplanted the creature inside an underground grotto, where the druid nurtured the tree until it produced the first seeds from which blights were generated. Since then, the blights can propagate themselves, but evil druids and clerics and cultists have been transporting the seeds to all sorts of places. In the Forgotten Realms Dale Reckoning year of 1490, so 9 years before the current official date of 1499 in Faerun, the half-orc anchorite of Talos, named Granok, cultivated the Golthias tree within the ruined manor in Neverwinter Wood, northwest of Conyberry. This is where the lore in the Dragon of Icespire Peak came from, published in September 2019. You can find it on page 44. And in Greyhawk, around 1492 DR, a Golthias tree appeared along the banks of the Stogenau River outside the Valjevo Castle in Flan. There's a Flan in Greyhawk and a Flan in the Forgotten Realms, in case this gets very confusing, causing the magical thicket around the castle to spill into the streets of Old Flan and generating malevolent blights. The source is from the February 2016 with the publication of the Reclamation of Flan PDF for the D&D Adventures League on pages 20 through 22. Those of you familiar with the Moonsea region of northern Faerun and the activities of the Zentarum faction in the area will know that the Quivering Forest near Flan has a population of Dark Fae and Treants and a zone bordering the Mount Bartok that is also a misty border with one of the domains of Dread. The whole place is best avoided and still infested with blights to this day. Why avoid it? Well, wander too far into the mist and you may find yourself trapped within Barovia and the domain of the infamous vampire Strahd von Zarovich. Golthias trees are potent sources of corruption and can turn a whole forest into a toxic bramble-filled death trap that spreads beyond the borders with supernatural speed, swallowing up whole areas previously the site of roads, farmsteads, and even whole townships. While the needle blights are now technically blind, they now have a form of alert signal in the form of a kind of pollen they release into the air that carries to any other blights who sense it in the air and immediately start moving towards the source of the pollen, swarming the area from all sides, a tactic we see perfectly represented in Baldur's Gate 3, the video game. In Act 2 in the video game, in the ruined battlefield, not too far from the Last Light Inn across the bridge and down the left-hand path, you can encounter a variant called the Shadow-Cursed Needle Blight, expertly concealing themselves in the creepy vegetation, waiting to ambush your character, springing out in a sudden surprise attack unless the player passes a DC 13 perception check. Obviously, the numbers of the checks are a bit different from the tabletop version of Dungeons & Dragons, and the Shadow-Cursed Needle Blights are a bit smaller, more fragile, and more numerous than the standard Needle Blights. They still weigh 100 pounds or 50 kilograms, so not easy to toss around. They do have a great feature that makes them very effective when part of an encounter, with a notably larger individual showing up and charging into the midst of the player character group to release a burst of vines. These vines hamper movement while also inflicting mild necrotic damage, but they are easy to destroy and fairly feeble vines, though I should warn you, the vines can't be destroyed just by using fire, which is a rare damage immunity for plant creatures. They don't have the standard Needle Blight claw attack, instead they release bursts of needles, staying close and surrounding the player group, releasing a lot of volleys of spines that are quite strong. Larian Studios does a great job of representing the creature's traditional lore and their accurate tactics, and the fact that the needle attack is a much more stronger attack than the claw attacks is accurate. When killed, the blights drop wood bark and can also drop shadow root sacks, which is a vile-smelling but alchemically valuable ingredient in making an elixir of viciousness, which reduces the target number for a critical hit by 1 point. In the game, the Shadow-Cursed Needle Blights will explode when killed, releasing a burst of needles, which, when chained together all at once, can be fairly devastating to a party of players all caught within the flanking circle of monsters. So, let's take a look at the Fey Needle Lord and its spawn. Then I'll introduce you to some recent lore from Magic the Gathering multiverse and the Cactus Folk of Thunder Junction. Needle Blights, Needle Lords, and Needle Spawn have lost the ability to speak Sylvan and now understand Common Tongue, but they can't speak at all. Needle Blights are still medium-sized and appear humanoid, and the Needle Lords are the larger, say, ogre size, and they have that special raking vine attack. Though in the role-playing game version, this is not an area attack, but targeted at one foe at a time within 10 feet, and the Needle Lord can grapple up to 2 targets at a time. Kind of like it's lashing out with its arm, and 2 vines can sprout, one from each arm, which also inflict ongoing piercing damage. The needle volley attacks are rapid, and while doing much less damage now, they have a 60-foot range and they can make up to 6 needle attacks per round, though no more than 2 of those can be against the same target in that turn. Also, each creature makes a melee attack against the Needle Lord takes 2 piercing damage. However, a creature can choose to make an attack with disadvantage to avoid this reciprocal damage. Needle Lords are known to sometimes form alliances with other malevolent species in the area, such as hobgoblins and kobolds, black dragons, hags, and other dark fae. The Needle Lords the Needle Spawn don't get a disadvantage on ranged attacks while within 5 feet of a hostile creature, so they avoid that rule. They also have the same sort of needle volley attacks and claw strikes that the Needle Lords do, but not as powerful. They can be devastating against player character parties in 5th edition D&D because it's a lot easier for them to get successful damaging hits in with a number of attacks they can combine as a group to shred their victims with, and it adds up very fast, so players have to be careful to avoid getting surrounded by the Blights, making the combat a lot more intense and tactical. If your players don't get into the habit of diving for cover and trying to keep attacking the Blights at a range further out than their blind sights can sense, they will most likely get thoroughly murdered and then just end up as another skeleton wrapped in very naughty foliage. In the Magic the Gathering multiverse, a recent development after the invasion by the forces of New Phyrexia saw a corruption and conversion of a type of Fey dimensional path network. You see this in the Feywild in the D&D multiverse and in the mythic Outer Planes entities like Yggdrasil, the World Tree of Isgard, and the Norse Pantheon, where the tree, or sometimes a mycelial fungus network, forms living connections between the different planes, demi-planes, and worlds. In the Magic of the Gathering multiverse, the conversion and forcing open of these portals resulted in what is now known as the Omen Paths, which, after the War of the Spark, and essentially the nerfing of all the planeswalkers, is pretty much the only way any of them can get from different locations through the blind eternities, the vast void which is kind of like that multiverse's ethereal plane. When this event occurred on a remote Wild West's frontier world, home to a lot of folks who don't want to be found, these cactus creatures suddenly started to become sentient, essentially waking up as a new species called the cactus folk. They're a lot more robust than the needle folk and have 4 arms on a standard humanoid-shaped body, a large featureless head, but a remarkable gift for biotechnology, growing living sidearms made from highly mutated and supercharged plant pods, growing their own protective garments and developing who knows what else in their well-protected desert homelands. As I say, they're a recent arrival, not well understood. They live in a harsh environment and are quite aggressive when fully grown, a bit prickly you could say. So I hope to see more about them and residents of Thunder Junction and the outlaw town of Omenport. Maybe we will. So circling back to the 5th edition D&D multiverse and the Needle Blights, all we really need to adjust is give the Needle Spawn 4 claw attacks and alter the text and range of the needle ranged attack to represent the creature firing a plant sidearm. Easily done. I think that about covers the Needle Man, the Needle Folk, the Needle Blights, and the Cactus Folk. My name is AJ Pickett. I have a massive archive of detailed monster ecology videos like this one on my channel, and I upload frequently with many more. So please consider subscribing, and if you catch these uploads, you can get notified when I do live streams on YouTube, where you can ask me all sorts of questions. In the meantime, thanks for listening, and as always, I'll be back with more for you very soon.